It's truly an honor for me to be sharing this space with you all, where the understanding of cartography is being broadened. I'm really also happy and honored to have received this invitation from the DEI committee. It's my first time presenting in this space, and I'm, like I said, really excited about sharing and learning this morning with everyone. Today I will be talking about embodied territorialities, and my presentation will focus specifically on Cuerpo-territorio, or body territory, and geographies otherwise, which are lessons I learned with and from Amazonian indigenous girls with whom I've been working with for 10 years. I will mainly devote my time today into kind of going over how is it that the global and transnational become intimate and embodied, and I will do so through a case study I've been conducting since 2016 in the multi-ethnic indigenous territory which I will be referring to as TIM, on which a Chinese company built a highway. So the experiences I want to share today are centered in this place. This is a map of the San Ignacio-San Borja Highway in Beni, Bolivia, whose construction began in late 2016. Along this road live not only the indigenous girls I work with, but this is also one of the areas most densely populated by indigenous communities in Bolivia. That team is home to 28 indigenous communities of Mojeño, Ignaciano, Mojeño Trinitario, Yuracaré, Chimán, and Mobima indigenous nations. This map you see claims to be a map of the girls' home, only its vantage point is from above, outside, and from quite far away. For the girls I work with, however, this map feels unrecognizable and unfamiliar. And that's because it erases and silences many aspects that are fundamental to life in, of, and with this place. For example, it erases the girls' stories, their desires, their needs, and crucially, the very existence of their bodies and those of their community. When we look critically at this kind of map, we can see that it offers a representation that is timeless, decontextualized, somewhat static, and disembodied. In doing so, it invites us, in one way or another, to ask what and who is missing from it. It reminds us of the importance of researching with our feet on the ground and focusing on the web of relationships that make up communal spaces like those of the girls, textures that are hard to discern from a bird's-eye perspective we see on the screen. Only by getting a little closer, we can begin to see what is really happening in this space and what truly matters. In the last decade, I've been working in the team and with the team. My friends and collaborators have shown me that the methods I was using, such as semi-structured interviews, were not enough to really comprehend their experiences. In the many conversations I had with women and girls, I discovered that there were things that simply could not be named or put into words. Se le nota en los ojos, it shows in her eyes, was the type of comment I would frequently hear when talking about women's experiences with the recently settled Chinese company in their territories. De solo verlos se me eriza la piel. Just seeing them gives me goosebumps, among other comments of similar nature, pointed to a joint, amalgamated, and indivisible experience of what to the eyes of everyone else were just external, material, and disembodied things. Clearly, the task was to fill. But how can we interrogate that relationality when most geographical and mapping methods are built upon homogenizing assumptions about the subjects, spaces, places, scales, and meanings that organize territorial spaces? Reflecting on these limitations and betting on the possibility of a feminist, anti-colonial, community-centered, and liberatory academic grammar, I asked the following question. What perspectives, sensitive to the emotional and independent of words, could enable the expression of these affective yet tangible forces interwoven in Santana's women and girls' bodies and territory? How can these tell the story of the ongoing reconfiguration of life in the team? This is how I came, those questions really are how I came to encounter indigenous feminisms and their many theorists. Women who had already been weaving their ideas and practices throughout Latin America, challenging colonial and patriarchal structures with visions deeply rooted in their territories and memories. Here, I want to show you just a few of the many faces of indigenous feminist thinkers who have been truly just teachers to me. Women who have taught me the importance of weaving conceptual lineages to open new paths for new directions in mapping. Lolita Chavez fights for autonomy. Lolita Chavez is over there. She fights for autonomy and self-determination over her body and women's bodies, reclaiming it as a space of pleasure as a form of resistance. Moira Millán has proposed concepts such as terricide to name the destruction of Earth and has called for the cultivation of ancestral arts of living with and on the land. Berta Cáceres, whose murder remains in impunity, devoted her life to defending and restoring the historical relationships of her people with rivers, mountains, and forests, also drawing connections between the defense of these territories from corporate exploitation and the defense of women's bodies from the violence that comes with it. Paulina Nosa, a longtime mentor of mine, to whom I truly just own much of who I am today, reminds us through her practice that the revitalization of ancestral memory around bodily healing is inseparable from the healing of the land and our planet's health. Victoria Inchu, finally, is a woman of profound wisdom and has fiercely stood up against ancestral patriarchies. Through all of their conceptualizations lies the relationality of life, a notion that in some contexts is understood as kinship. This means recognizing certain beings such as water, mountains, or animals as relatives, as kin from whom we descend and with whom we maintain relationships of reciprocity and respect. Indigenous feminisms put forth a way of understanding life as a woven fabric of interconnections where everything is related. This is the perspective from where indigenous feminisms challenge the very subject of hegemonic feminism, and rather than centering on the individual, it places territory and its communities as its main subject. From this perspective, indigenous feminisms offer fertile possibilities to reimagine geography and cartography. The everyday experiences and comments shared by my collaborators resonated strongly with Lorena Cabnal's theorization of Cuerpo-territorio. Maya Xinca Lorena Cabnal, as much as Aymara Adriana Guzman and Seneca theorist Michoana Goeman, have taught us that capitalist processes are never race or gender neutral. Stemming from this, I revisit Lorena Cabnal's conceptualization of body territory as a single word, as an indivisible unit, or as I like to conceptualize it, an amalgam. In Cabnal's words, the historical and oppressive violence exists for both my first territory body, as well as for my historical territory, the land. Understanding indigenous women and girls' spatialities, looking into the places they occupy or avoid and how, can reveal the processes of production of space beyond a point on a graph to rather make room for traces that carry with it ways of being in the world. Understanding that body territory intimately ties the physicality of the land, the tangible marks of the colonial, capitalist, patriarchal practice of empires, and the most sensitive fibers of the bodies, I proposed my collaborators to map. This was a form of enacting and taking seriously what it means to engage with indigenous communities, not only as subjects to be analyzed, but also as producers of theoretical knowledge. The considerations I just mentioned may not initially seem directly related to mapping practices. However, for those whose lives and ways of being in the world are deeply influenced by territorial dynamics, integrating these aspects is crucial. It is thus essential to remember that what human geographer Dennis Cosgrove emphasizes. To map is in one way or another to take measure of a world. And more than merely take it, to figure the measure so taken in such a way that it might be communicated between people, places, or times. The measure of mapping is not restricted to the mathematical. It may equally be spiritual, political, or moral. By the same token, the mapping record is not confined to the archival. It includes the remembered, the imagined, and the contemplated. To draw a map of the dynamics I was trying to make sense, I recalled anthropologist Nancy Shepherd Hughes' words, which guided me in this largely uncharted territory, especially within geography. She states that seeing, listening, touching, recording can be, if done with care and sensitivity, acts of fraternity and sisterhood, acts of solidarity. Above all, they are the work of recognition. Not to look, not to touch, not to record can be the hostile act, the act of indifference and of turning away. So here are the three of the maps drawn by 15 indigenous girls back in 2019 in the Santana de Museruna community, which, and I'll be centering on these three maps specifically. Their narrations, as you will see, pointed to several directions with commonalities and divergences, which I have organized in three main categories. The first one is traces of hope and dreams. The second one is geographies of fear. And the third one is violence, damage, and pain. And just to get us started, let's go over the first one, traces of hope and dreams. When I looked specifically at this part, I realized that the girls emphasized three critical areas: the family and home, common spaces such as the school, church, cabildo, or town hall, and field, among others, and the last category was nature. The hearts you see represent places where the girls feel joy, love, and safety toward their families, neighbors, forest, and the animals. They have pointed out that their throats let them know when they are happy, that they feel joy in their legs when running and playing soccer, in their hands when touching and doing things, and in their heads and ears with dreams, ideas, and songs. For instance, one map showcases a house in the heart with the words, "With my family, I feel safe." Another map mentions being united, kind, and respectful. And on a different map, a girl aspires to be, writes that she aspires to be a teacher, placing the dream in her forehead. This last thing that I mentioned is here. Another feature that I mentioned is this one, and here. Insisting on accounting the emotions of these bodies in and as spaces, these maps highlight the agency with which the girls subvert the perimeters and normative geographies set by those in power. Let's go over the geographies of fear now. Among the numerous routes marked by the girls on their maps, those depicting fear reveal complex experiences intertwined with nature, community, home, the campsite, and the highway itself. The word miedo, or fear, appears in various parts of the map. The girls signaled here that they feel fear in their hands, near the legs, and at the level of the stomach and hips. Phrases like "I'm afraid to stay home alone" or "drowning in the river" exemplify most of their fears. Furthermore, they've portrayed the highway and trucks located between the stomach and genitals as sources of fear. Notably, on this map, they drew a girl standing on one end of the highway, warning of danger, illustrating this as a site of fear and pain. It is striking to observe this warning accompanying note in the central graphic, and I'm referring specifically to this map now, but the other feature that I was mentioning is this one. Remarkably, the girls emphasized another crucial aspect, the distressing behaviors exhibited by the workers. Among the workers' shouts, their intimidating loud laughter and whistling, the objectualizing gestures, sexual jokes, and other forms of sexual harassment stood out. These distressing encounters significantly contributed to the fearsome landscapes they described in their experiences. Among other sites that represent fear are the cantina, where the workers gather during weekends to drink alcohol. For Santana's girls and women, the fear triggered by the company's presence is lived as predatory both in the land and in the body. Now, if we check the third category, violence, damage, and pain, we will notice that throughout the body mapping process as a space, the girls named collectively and out loud their experiences of violence and pain, experiences they typically wouldn't discuss with friends at school and let alone at home. As a result, their emotional geographies here narrate how and where the indigenous girls live their corporeal spatiality when it becomes painful. Pain, harm, and violence are depicted through the presence of band-aids on these maps. The girls placed band-aids on their hands, arms, hearts, or chests, genitals, faces, animals, and nature, areas where they have felt different kinds and types of pain. Negative thoughts, unpleasant memories, school performance, daily challenges, or chores are primary reasons pointed by them when talking and identifying some of these pains. They feel the pain and also the shame in their cheeks, the same cheeks where sometimes their parents would beat them if they behave disrespectfully. One map reads, "There are things to heal at home." In this instance, the girls intentionally shifted their focus from the issues related to the construction of the highway and the Chinese company, directing attention to the intricacies of their home life with violence. This is a way in which the girls invite us to settle in the lived experiences of contradiction and ambiguity. I want to turn now to the other area or place where the girls place their band-aids, which is nature. A striking observation across all the maps is that the river is consistently depicted as a site in pain. In one of the maps, we can read the word sanar, to heal, inscribed right on top of a river. Santana's River, being depicted by its strength and beauty that connects the community's families, is also identified as a site wounded by the pollution caused by the company. This was signaled as an important element for the death of animals that live in it and drink that water. The girls and their families, furthermore, are depicted in the river with their canoes, as this is also an important way of transportation and for fishing. Another map reads, "Do not cut trees." They have signaled that the construction of the highway has cut many, many trees and that they would like the trees to be treated with amability and respect. The damage inflicted on trees, as pointed out by the girls, is interconnected with the deaths of animals near the highway. Signaling that the workers do not take care for the animals, they recount witnessing the company's trucks not stopping when encountering snakes, families of capybaras, dogs, turtles, foxes, and other freely transiting animals before the company's arrival. These deaths, reflective in the desire to heal the polluted river causing harm to fish and driving animals away, extend to dogs, chickens, pigs, and cows depicted in the map. The presence of nature-related band-aids poignantly portrays amalgamated bodily and territorial affective processes, offering exceptional insights into the intricate relationship between the body and the territory as one. And well, I will be wrapping up my presentation soon, but as we near the conclusion, I'd like to share just a few additional insights regarding the lessons I've gleaned about research as a space of contention during my time working with the team. One fundamental realization has been that the research process itself must be subject of analysis and negotiation. In this particular case study, the image on this slide illustrates the outcome of one such negotiation. Towards the conclusion of the body mapping workshop, a girl raised her hand and a very unexpected question: "Where will these maps be displayed?" My response was that they weren't gonna, be displayed anywhere. They weren't intended for public display and were meant for the community itself. When I told her that, she expressed her disappointment, highlighting that her map, highlighting the beauty of her map and saying, "But our maps are so beautiful and we've put so much effort into them." Reflecting on this moment, a few months later, I reached out to an art gallery in La Paz, Bolivia, where I'm from, and the girls' maps were exhibited for a few weeks. at that gallery, providing the recognition they desired to have. Unfortunately, due to travel constraints at their ages, they weren't able to inaugurate the exhibit themselves. Nevertheless, we took definitely many measures to ensure their concerns and desires were acknowledged and addressed. I would like to conclude my presentation on this note, really, and just mention that body mapping, as envisioned by early feminist geographers like Diane Rochelau, encourages us to reimagine an academic grammar that embraces the body as our most immediate and intimate geography. This also reminds us that methods are powerful extensions of epistemological and ontological positions. The maps that we've seen here today reveal that, as Nightingale affirms, material environments inscribe profound implications for social difference, space, and ecologies that are rarely neutral. Their voices and bodies within their unique spatialities chart intricate paths to navigate both descent and hope within communities facing transformative changes, akin to the one I've explored in my case study. These girls, the girls' maps have destabilized the dominant notions and discourses that intend to depict them as either selfless fighters and victims or the uncritical beneficiaries of the company's presence. And in doing so, these embodied maps have showed us that there is a possibility for exceeding the binaries of outside and inside, material and subjective, and emotional and rational, to rather visualize and really just touch, make tangible the notion of territory with a special intimate clarity. All right, thank you.
I wondered if you could just say a little bit about in your work with the girls. I'm assuming there are moments of kind of ineffable things that couldn't be said or couldn't be expressed even with a drawing. And I wondered how, in your practice and your methodology, how do you sort of allow for those spaces of ineffability, the inability to sort of speak to experiences? Yeah.
You can use this or that one, whichever you want.
Okay. Yeah, that's a really important question. I think the key to those moments was just respecting and understanding that this was originally meant to facilitate a communal process. So within and understanding that as the primary goal, those silences, this body mapping workshop lasted over 4 hours. It took a really long time. So understanding those moments of silence, understanding the collective reading and exploring and observation of the maps afterwards was also a really powerful moment. But the core idea, especially when the maps were being observed collectively, was just really to spark a conversation. Afterwards, I wrote my master's thesis on that process, but when I was doing the body mapping exercise, I really didn't even think I was going to be in grad school, frankly. So I really, it was literally explicitly for that purpose. So the silences were navigated, the community, the mothers who were present during the body mapping workshop, and the girls very much decided how to handle that part, because that was the purpose of the exercise.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing your work. You just mentioned mothers, and so I was curious if mothers also participated and what that kind of intergenerational dialogue was. And I was also, when you said this, the young girl said, I want these displayed. I was waiting for the person to say, where's your map? Did you have to also map? Okay, that's a good question. Okay, so there were approximately 32 participants in the body mapping workshop. However, originally the idea was to have intergenerational groups, so moms with the girls. But then the girls decided they wanted to draw with other girls, and the moms were like, okay, we're gonna draw with other moms, and so it happened the way it happened, I do wonder what the maps would have looked like if it had been a more intergenerational, group. I feel like a lot of the things that the girls positioned
maybe wouldn't have been there because the moms definitely went in with the idea of like, how do we think about this highway specifically? Whereas the girls sort of, yeah, they were thinking about the highway definitely, but not exclusively about the highway. The girls, the prompts and the questions that I used to facilitate the body mapping workshop were interpreted differently by the girls. And so, yeah, and I did not draw my own map because I was facilitating, but it was really fun. It was really fun. There were some moments that were a little difficult, but like I said, luckily, like community leaders and the mothers were really apt and like able to navigate those moments of tension on their own terms. But yeah, so I couldn't map, but I still enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Nohely.